Welcome back to Chill Sports History. Tonight we're going back to one of the most dramatic World Series ever played and one of the strangest championship stories in modern baseball. This is the story of the 2001 Arizona Diamondbacks, a franchise in only its fourth season, taking on the New York Yankees, the three-time defending World Series champions, and a team that had spent the late 1990s turning October into its own personal stage. By the time the 2001 World Series began, the Yankees were not just a great team, they were a dynasty. They had won the World Series in 1996, 1998, 1999, and 2000. They had Derek Jeter, Mariano Rivera, Bernie Williams, Jorge Posada, Tino Martinez, Paul O'Neill, and Joe Torre in the dugout. They had won close games, blowouts, late comebacks, and elimination games. After a while, it started to feel like the biggest moments already belonged to them. And then, standing across from them were the Arizona Diamondbacks, a team that had only started playing Major League Baseball in 1998. A team with almost no history, no generations of fans, no old championship memories, and no reason to be the team that stopped New York from winning a fourth straight title. But Arizona had something powerful. They had two of the best pitchers in baseball. They had a veteran roster built to win right away. They had a hitter having the season of his life. And by the end, they had one soft little hit that changed baseball history. The Diamondbacks were not built like a normal expansion team. Most new franchises are forced to be patient. They lose, develop prospects, wait for draft picks, and slowly try to build towards something better. Arizona did not really do that. From the beginning, the organization wanted to matter quickly. Jerry Colangelo, who helped bring Major League Baseball to Arizona, was not interested in simply having a team that existed. He wanted a team that could win. Their first season, in 1998, looked like a normal expansion season. The Diamondbacks lost 97 games. They were new, uneven, and still learning what it meant to survive a Major League schedule. But then they made the kind of move that changed everything. After that season, Arizona signed Randy Johnson. Johnson was already one of the most intimidating pitchers baseball had ever seen. He was impossibly tall on the mound, throwing from the left side with a fastball that looked unfair and a slider that made hitters look helpless. When he arrived in Arizona, he was not there to gently guide a young franchise. He was there to dominate. The impact was immediate. In 1999, only the Diamondbacks' second season, they won 100 games and captured the National League West. A team that had just been born was suddenly winning a division. They lost in the playoffs to the New York Mets, but the message was clear. Arizona was not going to wait quietly for its turn. The Diamondbacks were going to take big swings, build aggressively, and try to win while the opportunity was there. By 2001, the team had changed again. Buck Showalter was gone, and Bob Brenly, a former catcher and broadcaster, had taken over as manager. Curt Schilling, acquired from the Philadelphia Phillies during the 2000 season, was now paired with Randy Johnson at the top of the rotation. And that pairing gave Arizona the foundation for the whole story. In a short postseason series, one ace can change everything. Two aces can make a team terrifying. Johnson and Schilling were very different pitchers, but together they gave Arizona certainty. Johnson was power and intimidation. Schilling was command and force. They did not just give Arizona good starts. They gave the Diamondbacks the feeling that no opponent was too big if those two pitchers were lined up. During the regular season, both of them were brilliant. Johnson won 21 games, struck out 372 hitters, and won another Cy Young Award. Schilling won 22 games, struck out 293, and finished second in the Cy Young voting behind his own teammate. That detail says a lot about what Arizona really was. This was not a lucky team being carried by a nice story. This was a team with two starting pitchers at the peak of their powers. But Arizona was not only two pitchers. Luis Gonzalez became the heart of the lineup. He had been a good player for years, steady and respected, but in 2001, he had the season of his life. Gonzalez hit 57 home runs, drove in 142 runs, and became one of the most dangerous hitters in the National League. For a franchise still trying to create its own history, Gonzalez gave Arizona a star position player to go with its two star pitchers. Around them was a group of players who made the Diamondbacks feel older than the franchise itself. Mark Grace had come from the Chicago Cubs and brought calm, professional at-bats. Matt Williams had been a star with the Giants. Steve Finley was experienced and dependable. Reggie Sanders added power. Tony Womack brought speed and contact. Craig Counsell had already been part of a World Series winner with the Florida Marlins in 1997, and he had a way of showing up in strange October moments. This was a young franchise, but it was not a young roster. It was a team built from players who understood that chances to win do not last forever. The regular season was strong, but not overwhelming. Arizona went 92-70 and won the National League West. They were good, but they were not some unstoppable machine. They had flaws, especially in the bullpen, and their offense could be inconsistent outside the biggest names. But, with Johnson and Schilling at the top, the Diamondbacks always had a path. If they could get into October, their pitching could make anything possible. Their first postseason test came against the St. Louis Cardinals in the Division Series. Right away, the series showed what Arizona's October would become. It was tense, narrow, and built around pitching. Game 1 was a Curt Schilling masterpiece. He shut down St. Louis in a 1-0 win, setting the tone for the Diamondbacks postseason. But the Cardinals pushed Arizona all the way to a fifth and deciding game. Game 5 became the first major pressure point in the Diamondbacks' run. Arizona had Schilling on the mound again, facing Matt Morris and the Cardinals. Reggie Sanders gave the Diamondbacks a lead with a home run, and for a while, it looked like that might be enough. But in the 9th inning, J.D. Drew tied the game for St. Louis. Suddenly, Arizona's season was in danger. Then, Tony Womack came through in the bottom of the 9th. With the game tied and the pressure rising, Womack delivered a walk-off single that sent Arizona to the National League Championship Series. It was the first sign that this team would need more than Johnson, Schilling, and Gonzalez. To win a championship, they would need big moments from all over the roster. And Womack, who would matter again later in the biggest inning of the year, had already helped save the season once. In the National League Championship Series, Arizona faced the Atlanta Braves. The Braves were not the Yankees, but they were their own kind of postseason institution. Through the 1990s, Atlanta had been built around pitching, consistency, and division titles. Greg Maddux, Tom Glavine, and John Smoltz had made the Braves a permanent part of October. If Arizona wanted to reach the World Series, it had to get past a team that knew exactly how to play at that time of year. The Diamondbacks beat Atlanta in 5 games. Schilling threw a brilliant game. Johnson helped close out the series. And Craig Counsell became one of the unexpected stars, winning National League Championship Series MVP. Counsell was not the biggest name on the team. His batting stance was unusual. His game was built around smaller things, and yet there he was, right in the middle of Arizona's first pennant. This team had huge stars, but it also had role players who kept finding themselves in enormous moments. By late October, the matchup was set: Arizona Diamondbacks against New York Yankees, a fourth-year franchise against the defending champions, the Desert against the Bronx, a team trying to create its first great memory against a team trying to extend one of baseball's great dynasties. But the 2001 World Series also carried a weight that went beyond baseball. The September 11th attacks had happened less than 2 months earlier. The season had paused. New York was grieving. The country was shaken. And when the Yankees reached the World Series, their run became impossible to separate from that larger moment. In a normal year, Arizona might have been the easy sentimental underdog, but in 2001, the Yankees carried the emotional pull. They were the dynasty, but they were also the team connected to a wounded city. That made the Diamondbacks' role complicated. They were trying to win a baseball series, but they were doing it against an opponent wrapped in history, grief, pride, and momentum. The Yankees were already the most famous team in the sport. Now they also felt like the team of the moment. and Arizona, for all its talent, was still the new club from the desert trying to interrupt a story that much of the baseball world seemed ready to see continue. The series began in Arizona, at Bank One Ballpark. Game 1 gave the Diamondbacks exactly what they needed. Curt Schilling started against Mike Mussina, and after the Yankees scored early, Arizona took control. The Diamondbacks won 9-1. For one night, the Yankees looked vulnerable. The defending champions had come west, and Arizona had punched first. Game 2 was even stronger. Randy Johnson took the mound, and when Johnson was right, games could feel almost hopeless for the other team. The Yankees were used to October pressure. They were used to big crowds, big names, and big moments. But Johnson was a different kind of problem. He overwhelmed New York, and Arizona won 4-0. Suddenly, the Diamondbacks had a 2-0 series lead. They had held the Yankees to 1 run in 2 games, and for a moment, it looked like this new franchise might not just challenge the Dynasty, it looked like they might control it. But dynasties usually do not end quietly. The series moved to New York for Game 3, and the Yankees began to pull themselves back in. Roger Clemens started for New York, and the Yankees won 2-1. It was not a loud win, but it changed the feeling of the series. Arizona was still ahead, but Yankee Stadium was now involved. And in that era, once Yankee Stadium got involved in October, everything felt different. Game 4 is where the series turned from dramatic into unforgettable. The Diamondbacks led 3-1 going into the bottom of the 9th. They were 3 outs away from taking a 3-1 series lead, which would have put them 1 win from a championship. Bob Brenly turned to Byung-Hyun Kim, Arizona's young closer. Kim was only 22 years old, a side-arming right-hander from South Korea with unusual movement and a difficult delivery. He had been important to Arizona all season, but now he was being asked to get the biggest outs of his life in Yankee Stadium. Kim got close, very close. The Yankees were down to their final out, but with 1 man on base, Tino Martinez came to the plate and hit a game-tying home run. Yankee Stadium exploded. Arizona's lead was gone. The game moved into extra innings. And just after midnight, Derek Jeter hit a walk-off home run into right field. Because the game had moved from October 31st into November 1st, Jeter's home run became part of Yankee mythology. He was suddenly Mr. November. For Arizona, it was crushing. Instead of leading the series 3-1, the Diamondbacks were tied at 2 games apiece. For New York, it felt like another chapter in a story that never seemed to run out of dramatic endings. The Yankees had looked beaten. Then, in 1 swing from Tino Martinez and 1 swing from Derek Jeter, they had turned the series back toward themselves. Game 5 made it even worse. Arizona led 2-0 going into the 9th inning. Again, Byung-Hyun Kim was on the mound. Again, the Diamondbacks were 1 out away, and again, the Yankees found a way to tie it. This time it was Scott Brosius hitting a 2-run home run that brought Yankee Stadium back to life. One night after Tino Martinez had saved New York, Brosius did the same thing. The Yankees eventually won in the 12th inning on a hit by Alfonso Soriano. New York now led the series 3-2. The emotional swing was enormous. Arizona had been 3 outs away from taking control in Game 4. Then they had been 1 out away from winning Game 5. Instead, they were heading home 1 loss from elimination. The Yankees had taken 2 games that looked almost finished, and they had done it in the most Yankee way possible. Late home runs, roaring crowds, and the feeling that October magic still belonged to them. This is where Arizona's story could have ended. A new franchise gets close. A dynasty reminds everyone who owns the stage. The young closer is devastated. The Yankees fly to Arizona needing only 1 more win. And the Diamondbacks, after having 2 games ripped away, start to feel like a team that had its chance and missed it. But that is not what happened. In Game 6, Arizona responded with one of the loudest answers possible. The Diamondbacks crushed the Yankees 15-2. Randy Johnson started, Arizona's offense erupted, and everything that had gone wrong in New York seemed to get washed away in one overwhelming night. It did not erase Games 4 and 5, but it changed the emotional temperature. The The Diamondbacks were not broken. They had forced a Game 7, and Game 7 had almost everything a baseball story could want. Curt Schilling started for Arizona. Roger Clemens started for New York. Randy Johnson, after pitching the night before, was available out of the bullpen. Mariano Rivera, the greatest closer in the sport, was waiting for the Yankees. Arizona was trying to win the first championship in franchise history. New York was trying to win its 4th straight World Series and 5th in 6 years. It was one game in the desert with an entire era hanging over it. For most of the night, Game 7 was tense and tight. Schilling and Clemens both pitched like veterans who understood the moment. The game did not open up. It stayed narrow, which made every pitch feel heavier. In the 6th inning, Arizona scored first when Danny Bautista doubled and drove in Steve Finley. The Diamondbacks led 1-0, and with Schilling on the mound, that felt meaningful. But the Yankees answered. In the 7th inning, Derek Jeter scored on a single by Tino Martinez, tying the game. Then in the 8th, Alfonso Soriano hit a home run off Schilling to give New York a 2-1 lead. It felt like the old Yankee pattern again. Soriano had already won Game 5. Now he had given the Dynasty a late lead in Game 7. Then Bob Brenly made one of the defining decisions of the series. He went to Randy Johnson out of the bullpen. Johnson had started Game 6 the night before, but this was Game 7 of the World Series. There was no tomorrow. Johnson came in and held the Yankees where they were. It was the perfect image of Arizona's whole season. When everything was on the line, the Diamondbacks still had Randy Johnson and Curt Schilling. Going to the bottom of the 9th, the Yankees led 2-1, and on the mound was Mariano Rivera. For almost any team in baseball, that felt like the end. Rivera was not just a great closer, he was the great closer. Calm, precise, and almost mechanical. His cut fastball had broken bats and broken rallies all through the Yankees dynasty. He was the final door, and in October, that door almost never opened. The Diamondbacks needed 1 run to stay alive and 2 to win the championship. Mark Grace led off the inning with a single. Grace had spent so many years with the Chicago Cubs, playing on teams that never quite reached this kind of stage. Now, late in his career, he had opened the door in the 9th inning of Game 7 of the World Series. Damian Miller came up next and tried to bunt. Rivera fielded the ball, but his throw to second was not clean. David DeLucci, who had come in to run, slid in safely, and suddenly Arizona had 2 runners on with nobody out. Rivera still had the ball, and the Yankees still had the lead, but the Diamondbacks had life. Jay Bell came in to pinch hit, and Rivera seemed to regain control for a moment. Bell bunted, and Rivera threw to third for the force out. The Yankees had cut down the lead runner. Midre Cummings came in to run for Miller, and now Arizona still had runners on base, but the inning had tightened again. Rivera was still one good sequence away from escaping. Then Tony Womack stepped to the plate. Earlier in the postseason, Womack had delivered the walk-off hit that sent Arizona past St. Louis. Now, in the 9th inning of Game 7 of the World Series, he delivered again. Womack doubled down the right field line, scoring the tying run and moving the winning run to third. The game was tied 2-2. The Yankees had been 3 outs from another championship. Now the Diamondbacks were one good swing away from taking it from them. Rivera hit Craig Counsell with a pitch, loading the bases. Counsell, the NLCS MVP, was standing at first. Jay Bell was at third as the championship-winning run. The infield came in. The Dynasty was still on the field. Rivera was still on the mound. And the entire season had narrowed down to 1 at-bat. Then Luis Gonzalez came to the plate. It was the perfect ending, although no one could have known it in advance. Gonzalez had been Arizona's great offensive star all season. He had hit 57 home runs. He had carried the lineup. If baseball were scripted in the most obvious way, maybe he would have hit a towering home run into the night, something that matched the size of his regular season and the size of the moment. But baseball is usually better because it is stranger than that. The Yankees brought the infield in. Rivera threw his cutter. Gonzalez fought it off. The ball floated softly over the drawn-in infield and dropped into shallow center field. Jay Bell came home. The Arizona Diamondbacks won the World Series. It was not a majestic hit. It was not loud off the bat. It was not the kind of swing remembered for its power. It was a little broken bat bloop, soft enough to look almost accidental and perfect enough to end a dynasty. After all the pressure, all the history, all the late Yankee comebacks, and all the weight of Mariano Rivera on the mound, the final act was a ball barely lifted over the infield. Randy Johnson and Curt Schilling shared World Series MVP, which felt exactly right. Gonzalez had the final hit, and without him there is no perfect ending. But the Diamondbacks championship was built on Johnson and Schilling. Schilling won Game 1 and started Game 7. Johnson won Game 2, started Game 6, and came back in relief in Game 7. It was an old-school, almost impossible workload, and it gave Arizona the backbone it needed to stand up to the Yankees. For the Yankees, the loss marked the end of something. They would remain good. They would keep contending. They would win again later in the decade. But the late 1990s Dynasty, the team that had seemed to own the World Series, did not win another title together. Paul O'Neill retired after the season. Tino Martinez left. Scott Brosha is retired. The core began to change. The Yankees did not disappear, but that version of them had finally been stopped. For Arizona, the championship was sudden and almost fleeting. The Diamondbacks did not become the next dynasty. They had built aggressively, and that kind of approach came with a cost. The roster was older, the finances became difficult, and the window did not stay open the way it might have for a younger team built slowly over time. But that also makes the 2001 title feel complete as a story. It was not the beginning of a long reign. It was one perfect season where the pieces came together at exactly the right time. When people remember the 2001 World Series, they often remember the Yankees' comebacks in Games 4 and 5. Those nights felt like the old Yankee magic at full strength. But the bigger story is what happened after that. Arizona absorbed those losses. The Diamondbacks went home down 3-2, with the baseball world feeling as if the Yankees had found their familiar October rhythm. And instead of folding, Arizona won Game 6 by 13 runs, then came back against Mariano Rivera in the 9th inning of Game 7. That is why this story still works. It is not just that the Diamondbacks beat the Yankees, it is how close they came to becoming another supporting character in the Yankees dynasty. They were almost the team that blew Game 4, almost the team that blew Game 5, almost the team that watched Mariano Rivera close the door. Instead, they became the team that took the dynasty down. The 2001 Arizona Diamondbacks did not have decades of tradition behind them. They did not have the Yankees aura, or the Yankees history, or the Yankees' place in American sports culture. But for 7 games in the fall of 2001, they had enough. Enough pitching, enough veterans, enough resilience, enough timing. And in the bottom of the 9th inning of Game 7, against the greatest closer baseball had ever seen, they had just enough lift on one little swing. That was how the Arizona Diamondbacks took down a dynasty. And that's the story for tonight. A 4-year-old franchise built in a hurry, led by 2 legendary pitchers, facing the most famous team in baseball at the height of its power. The Yankees had the history, they had the rings, they had the closer, they had the late-game magic. But the Diamondbacks had the final rally, the final swing, and the final word. Thanks for spending this time with Chill Sports History. We love sharing these fun stories with you every week. If you'd like to come back for another story, we'd be very happy to have you here, and we can't wait to share more with you.